If I could describe my childhood in one word, I would use the word unsafe. You're bringing shame to your family. Sorry, this may be triggering, but suicide was a very real friend of mine. A grief where my innocence was stolen from me at the age of 3. Bruised face, big sunglasses, but no one said or did anything. There is a pandemic here happening in our backyard. What was modeled to me was a toxic relationship. Your childhood trauma wasn't your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. In order to heal, we must feel. Shame was something that crippled me for so many years. That poor therapist probably needed therapy after our session. All of us are longing for belonging and connection. Look up, brothers. You're not alone.
I am so excited, and I know many of you are very excited too. It's an incredible moment that we get to share this space with Matt Brown, and we've all been waiting for this. So Matt, a huge welcome to the High Performance Leadership Program.
Thank you, brother.
I'd like to start at the beginning. And for me, the beginning of our relationship was, I picked up this book, this amazing book called She Is Not Your Rehab. And I was like, what does that mean? I need to understand that. I want to go deeper with that. So I bought this book, started reading it, and within a few chapters, it moved me. I was very sad at times, angry at times, very emotional. I was looking at the book through the eyes of little Matt, you being a young boy, and the things that you had to traverse. And each and every one of us, we have challenges, adversity, problems, we've got history. But when I read that, I go, okay, this puts a perspective on things of we can live in our past, or we can choose to learn from our past and move forward and heal. Your story, I've never heard anything like it. So please, can I ask you, would you mind with the audience sharing your story?
Kia ora, brother. Talofa lava, tēnā koutou katoa, ko teimalalangi mā te whawhetai ma le tō Brown, toku ingoa. Growing up in Christchurch in Ōtutahi, not many people could pronounce my name, so Matt Brown stuck. I was born up in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland to be exact, Mangere to be exact, 275, but raised down here on Christchurch, Hornby in the east side of Christchurch, Aranui to be exact. I grew up in a if I could describe my childhood in one word, I would use the word unsafe. Unsafe. It was unsafe to have an opinion, it was unsafe to think, it was unsafe to speak, it was unsafe to be me, Matt Brown. When the infamous movie Once We're Warriors was released, I was 10 years old. I sat on the whala, on the mat, on the ground, and my siblings and I, we laughed, we cracked up through the entire film because we thought it was a comedy. We would compare Beth Heke's black eyes to my mum's black eyes. Mum's black eyes are way bigger than Beth's because she would go to church like this, bruised face, big sunglasses, but no one said or did anything. People knew the violence, people heard the violence, but no one ever spoke up. And so for me, navigating my masculinity, what it means to be a man around violence was very hard. You never forget, sorry, this may be triggering, but you never forget the feeling of another man's private parts on your body as a young kid, at the age of 3. To then watch the person who's perpetrating violence on you leave your body and do the same to your little brother. Like, that shit never leaves you. And so I left home at 15, trying to navigate my masculinity. Suicide was a very real friend of mine, a companion who sat on my shoulder continuously throughout high school. And so my option was either take my own life or speak up. And so I've been speaking about the harms of domestic violence, sexual abuse since I was 15. When we were all given our 3-minute speech in English, I courageously chose to speak up and talk about family violence in school. And I still remember my peers, my Pacific community, my boys, challenged me, bro, the shit you're talking about, like, we know it happens to all of us, but you're bringing shame to our culture. You're bringing shame to your family. But for me, the option was take my own life or speak up. And so I spoke up, left home, and at the age of 15, that was hard. I moved out of home into a boys' home. And when I was surrounded by these other boys, I soon learned that I wasn't alone in my own journey. And so I fell in love with barbering. I started cutting hair in my little garden tin shed in Aranui here. And it was from this space, cutting hair, where I soon learnt that we were more alike than we are different. That shame, pain, trauma, family violence did not discriminate. I would have men in gang patches, to men in uniforms, firefighters, policemen, to men in suits, suit and tie. And when I cut these men's hair, I soon learned their stories, and fuck, we are more alike than we are different. And so being a barber, listening to men's stories has been the greatest honor of my life. And so that book at the back really was birthed from the place of my lived experience, watching my dear mum be a rehab centre to my father. By the age of 10, I lived in every woman's refuge home here in Christchurch. And that was hard, lining up at the food banks, not knowing if we were going to, eat that night, being homeless and sleeping in the car because we were kicked out. And I would always question Mum, like, my dad's going to kill you one day, why don't you just leave him? And her response was always the same, like, son, I don't have any other options, And so, yeah, that's the beginning in a nutshell. So.
Whew. Thank you for sharing that. How did you navigate your way out of that? Most people would not be sitting here, would not have written a best-selling book, have a global movement, have an incredible gallery in the city centre. Most people, that wouldn't be a reality. What started to develop in here that allowed you to move forward in a really positive way?
I was curious. Like when men started telling me their stories in my little garden tin shed, when I started cutting hair 15 years ago, it was the empathy that sat listening to these guys' stories. I would judge them. I had my preconceived ideas. This guy, he wore a suit. He didn't look like me, didn't talk like me. But when I heard his story, like, he also struggled with shame. He also had his own pain and trauma that he didn't talk about. And these men were gifting me their stories that they had never told their wives, their partners, their parents. And so I thought, man, like the simple act of cutting a hair, the power of just cutting hair and connecting with men was healing for myself. It was in the chair where I learned how to be a father, asking dads, what were your failings or what did you do wrong? How can I be better? It was in the chair where I learned how to be a good partner. How do you treat your woman? How do we talk to our woman? Because if you've never, growing up in a household like me, if you've never ever witnessed what a healthy relationship looked like, what was modeled to me was a toxic relationship, was mum getting the shit beaten out of her endlessly. And so to then think, am I going to become a perpetrator? Am I going to, reenact, carry on this cycle? I soon learned, no, that's not who I want to be. So it was from these conversations, having these courageous conversations in my barbershop, in my barber chair, where I really learned how to navigate of what kind of man I wanted to be. Incredible.
And what kind of man did you want to be? If you had to picture that or define that, you had this example of your dad. That was your example as a kid. And for most of us, our biggest role models and the people that impress the most things on us are our mum and dad. Yeah. So you had this model here. How did you know to even construct what this might look like, knowing that this is all you ever really knew?
This is all I knew. I knew that this is not what I wanted to be. I knew the fear, the shame that I carried, the pain that I carried, that was something I never wanted to transmit onto my children. And my greatest invitation to becoming the man that I wanted to be, that I always dreamed to be, was when my son was born. This little thing who came out of his mum and all it did was scream and cry and shit. But I fell in love. It was love at first sight. And I then learned, if I was to be the father that I'd never witnessed, the partner that I'd never witnessed, I had to forgive. I had to heal. And when I talk about forgiveness, I'm not talking about condoning the violence that I was subjected to, but it was letting go, because, your childhood trauma wasn't your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. And I knew that if I didn't heal and forgive, that pain, that mama, that bitterness, that anger, that resentment towards the people who perpetrated violence would transmit onto the most vulnerable of society, which was my children, our children, and our partners. And so I had to let go. Because, people who perpetrated violence, from my older cousins, babysitters, men and female, I don't know what they were doing with their lives. For all I know, they could be sleeping peacefully. I was the one that was left with the pain, with the shame of it. And so I had to let go of it, so I could be the best dad to my kids.
That's beautiful. And the book, like I look at the book and it's, to me, it was almost like a handbook for me as a dad, for me as a partner, to look at, okay, these are things that we can do. We can carry pain, we can have resentment, hatred, but actually there's a pathway to forgiveness. There's a pathway to moving forward through all of our challenges. What was that pathway for you to forgive and to move forward?
Man, I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to healing, because all of our journeys are different, all of our pain and trauma is different. for me, it was really, this is the first generation we've ever told people to feel. My dad's generation, our father's generation was, the school of hard knocks. Their job was to go to work, put food on the table. That was the way that they showed you that they loved you. Feelings, like what the hell is feeling? And so for me, to do different and be different, I had to feel all those feels. I'm a massive believer in order to heal, we must feel. And so what does feeling actually look like? How do we even navigate through these feelings of, what lived beneath my anger? What lived beneath my resentment and bitterness? And underneath that, when I searched and navigated those hard waters, I found grief. The grief of a childhood I never had, the grief where my innocence was stolen from me at the age of 3. All these feelings I had to feel, and I just wept. When my son was 3 years old, not many people know this, every day I put my boy to sleep, I cried. I cried because this kid, again, lives a completely different life to how his father was raised. He's going to sleep peacefully. He lives in a home where he's not listening to his mum screaming and crying, getting the shit beat out of her. I cried every night. My son was 3. When he turned 4, that crying stopped. But I allowed myself to feel those feels. And it wasn't, I didn't fall into the dump of feeling sorry for myself. I surrounded myself with men, with people who could help me navigate those hard waters. I signed up to therapy. I talked to men in the barber shop who were beautiful fathers who weren't, again, transmitting their pain onto their children and partners. And so, yeah.
Incredible. Thank you. And so I want to talk about this. You started in a tin shed cutting hair. And then you had the most incredible barbers in Rickerton. And this was a barber's that for 3 or 4 months you couldn't get booked in. You had to book in advance. It's incredible. It's a household name in Christchurch. What gave you the confidence to go, I'm going to start here, I've never done this before, and I'm going to grow it and build it?
So I never started out to be the greatest barber or have the busiest barber shop. I really just wanted to cut hair. And cutting hair became a bit, I'm a creative first and foremost, and so I attempted to shave portraits of, famous movie stars, rappers, sports stars, and I went viral on social media when I did a portrait of Tupac, my favorite rapper Tupac. I grew up in the 90s, so I did this portrait of Tupac. I put it up on Facebook. I woke up the next day and it had over 1 million likes and shares. I thought I was the man, and then that went viral, and barbers from all around the world were reaching out and wanting to connect on social media, and so that kind of gave me a little push of a moment of inspiration. Oh man, I can do this. I can take this further. And so my best friend at the time, who was living up in Tamaki Makaurau, Sarah, she said, I wanted to take my barbering seriously. And so she said, if you're serious, come up to Auckland. And my father owns a hairdressing academy called Seville's. He has a barber, he can teach you. And so I was like, yeah, sounds good. I went up to Auckland for a few months, cut hair out of this, high-end barbershop just off Queen Street. I learned under this 4th generation Turkish barber. And I'll never forget the day I walked into his salon, barbershop, and I said, kia ora, my name's Matt, put my hand out. And he looked at me and goes, all you young barbers are full of shit. I'm like, oh. I said nothing because I learned that this guy was 10th dan black belt, so I wasn't going to say anything. I thought, okay, sweet. And so I just swept the floor and I just watched this man, and the way he serviced, his haircuts, it was high-end. The cheapest haircut in that barbershop was $150 for a 30-minute haircut. I'm like, that is very expensive. Where I come from is $10. But I was dressed like this. All the men that were coming through were wearing suits, suit and tie, all businessmen, and I was sweeping the floor. But the way this guy served the men in the chair, and just listening to the conversation, his English wasn't the best, but these men were opening up their hearts to him and telling him their stories. And I thought, that's what I want to take back to my neighborhood. And so I came back and then Christchurch men started opening up, and I thought, man, I'm only one barber, there's only so many heads I can cut. How do we create a bigger impact in this city and normalizing the conversation around mental health? And so I had a dream to open up a bigger barbershop, and I reached out to Sarah, who was now living in Rarotonga. She was coming back to New Zealand. She said, I'm coming back to New Zealand. I said, man, do you want to come to Christchurch and help me build this business? And she said, yep, I'll give you a year. And I said, sweet. So Sarah's background, my wife, I ended up asking her to be my girlfriend, which now we're married and 3 kids. Her background was marketing and events. And so she gave me a year. And that year, we Our social media presence was massive. And she said, how about we start teaching people, you want a barbershop, the way we're going to raise this money, not drug dealing, not doing bad things, was, working legit. And so I said, well, how can we do that? And she said, how about we start running barber, these events? And I said, no one's going to want to come and learn from me. Like, I'm just a boy from the hood. And she said, no, people want to learn how to do this hair art, the portraits that you're doing. Like, no one's doing that down under. And so we put it up online. We did 3 shows around New Zealand, Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch. The first 10 minutes, it sold out.
Wow.
And 50 barbers and hairdressers came to this. And I was like, fuck, again, this gave me, another window to life. Like, oh, this is possible for me to, open up this barber shop. And then Sarah said, how about we take this tour to Australia? And I said, oh man, no one's gonna wanna come listen to me in Aussie. Like, people don't even know me over there. Anyway, Sarah put it up on social media, on our Facebook, and in the first hour, 29 shows sold out in 9 cities. And so we did that in 2 weeks. We came back. In that 2 weeks, we made $80,000. And that was just working hard. And I came back, I was depleted, tired, and we had enough money to open up our barbershop in Riccarton. And so for me, I share that story to the boys in my neighborhood because, growing up in poverty, growing up where, you weren't served the best cards on the table, it was a different window for a lot of my boys in my neighborhood to see, man, you can work hard, legit, not go down this path of gang culture and drug dealing and make a living. So.
Amazing. You've totally rewrote that narrative for so many young men that will be in a similar situation that you were in as a child. It's incredible and amazing to watch your brand just explode globally. It's amazing. And Sarah, like you've mentioned Sarah, tell me a little bit more about Sarah and the impact she's had on your heart, had on your vision.
Man, the wisest, the most business decision, the wisest business decision I ever made was ask Sarah to be my girlfriend. We were best friends for 4 years. Sarah had a daughter, our oldest girl, Oceana. I came into Oceana's life when she was 6. And so I knew, again, from my childhood, that what kind of man I didn't want to be. And so I knew, I treated carefully, with these 2 precious wahine in their hearts. I treated carefully. I didn't want to be that guy that led on Sarah and then, broke Oshi's heart. And so we were just friends for 4 years. All my clients were like, I'm sure you guys are hooking up. I was like, nah, we're not. Like, I have trust issues, because of my own childhood, I have trust issues, and Sarah's got her own issues. And so, it came to the end of that year that Sarah gave me after Rarotonga. She was going to move back to Tamaki, and I asked her, do you want to be my girlfriend? And she said, look, I love you, man. She was shocked. She said, I love you, but you need to check your ass into therapy because your issues and your pain is not mine to carry. I'm here to support you and cheer you on, but it's your responsibility. And I swear to God, that poor therapist probably needed therapy after our session. I just went blank. Here's my story. Put me back together. But it was beautiful. Sarah's the love of my life. I would not be the man I am today if not for her. I don't adhere to behind every good man is a great woman. She's not behind me. She's right next to me doing the mahi, doing this work. She is a strong mana wahine from Te Raroa, Ngāpuhi, of Māori descent. And she is the creative force behind all the work that we do. I'm a very shy introvert guy, so I hate public speaking. I hate being in the limelight. But my wife was like, you get your ass out there and you tell your story. So I'm like, I married a very strong wahine.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I hope you all get to meet Sarah. She's an incredible speaker too. Please do look her up when you're looking Matt up today. Sarah's incredible, and he's right. She stands in her own right alongside Matt. She's an inspiration. I want to ask you about the work you do together. I've been following your journey for a wee while now, and you and Sarah do some incredible work together. And I believe you've been in it and working in prisons as well. Tell me a little bit about that work and why it means so much to you.
Well, when we were approached by Penguin, our publisher, to write this book, we had been working on this book for a while, for a few years. And so when Penguin came along, I said my dream was to actually get this book. We wrote this book to get into prisons because I was the kid who waited patiently. Every time Dad did a long leg in prison, I would wait patiently, hoping when Dad got out that something would have worked inside, that the light bulb went on or someone said something to him that would change him from abusing us. Unfortunately, that day never came. And so the heart in writing this book was getting it in the hands of men who, had this opportunity to be sober, no negative surroundings around them other than other people incarcerated, but, they had this time to really do the work. And so, when we proposed it to Penguin said, well, our mission is to actually sell books, not give them away for free. But I said, how much would this cost? And at the time, there was 2021, there was 9,350 people incarcerated in this country. Over half of that are Indigenous people, Māori and Pacific. And so Penguin said, this is going to cost you 9,350 people in prison. This is going to cost you guys about $100,000. And so we went knocking on different people, organisations, government, the police, and they all gave us this putia, gave us this money. And so wifey texted Penguin, said, I have the money, send me the invoice, send me the books. And so 2021, every person incarcerated in this country was gifted a book for Christmas. The letters, the messages that we've received since then from men incarcerated, women and men incarcerated, has been worth it. Has been the greatest honour. To have messages from children write to us and say, this is the first time I've ever heard my father apologise. This is the first time I've ever heard my father apologise to my mum, apologise to us. My mum and dad are now walking around their house like they're back in high school, in love. The book it was taking all the psychobabble, academia language and simplifying it for our men, black and white. This is what you need to do. This is a roadmap, my roadmap of how I healed. It's possible for you.
It's really powerful. And what I loved about it was, you're right, there's all this psychobabble that I don't understand, and you were able to distill it all, and I could connect at a heart level and a head level and go, this makes sense. And the one thing about the book I want to reiterate is I read it not in prison, in a healthy relationship, but going, oh, I could step up in that. Oh, look how Matt handled that. That could really help me feel better, experience more joy, interact better with the people I love most. It was one of those books that impacted me. So I think it's written, obviously, with that specific in mind, but it actually applies to all of us.
Definitely. And I mean, we've been doing this work now for 15 years, talking about these hard conversations that are very tapu, very sacred, very taboo. And it started from a barbershop, in a real place where men come, to converse and, to look good. And I still remember, our government reached out to us and said, how can we collaborate with you? Because we're seeing the work that you're doing grassroots. A lot of these men that you're working with are not reoffending. Every person, 100% of the men who have come through our barbershop, have come through our programs, have stopped reoffending. And, psychologists and corrections are like, what is the blueprint? What are you doing with these men? And for me, it's just walking alongside men and listening and being empathetic with them, showing up for them, telling them that I see them. Because all of us are longing for belonging and connection. Every single one of us, I've been a barber for a long time. All of us are longing for connection and belonging. And so when the government approached us, my first response was, hell no, I want to collaborate with the government. Where I come from, we don't trust you.
Yeah.
But Sarah, my strong wahine, she said, no, we're going to do this because we can get into spaces that you won't be able to get into. And so we did. We took some money, and my dream was to run these wānanga, a gathering, a conference for barbers, again, teaching other barbers around the country how to have these conversations. And we ran 4. The government gave us enough money to run 4. So 50 barbers per wānanga came to these. And I remember at one of these wānanga, every wānanga I always share my story quite raw to barbers, and I always run this activity called the Circle of Courage. And one of the questions I always ask in the Circle of Courage is, I'll ask it here. Hands up in this room if you've ever felt misunderstood. Yeah. So all of us, right? And so I ask these questions to the barbers. Step inside the circle if you've ever felt heartbroken. So the old guys stand in the circle, the young guys are giggling outside. And one of the questions I get to is, step inside the circle if you've ever been sexually abused. Out of 50 barbers in this one wānanga, 47 men stood in that circle.
Wow.
47 men who have never, ever told their stories with their words, with their lips. But you see, to me, that tells me there is a pandemic here happening in our backyard. And these were not just brown barbers. These were barbers from all different walks of life. 47 men who stood in that circle and just cried and wept. And I said, look up, brothers, you're not alone. And so the reason why I bring that, because I'm not a fan of what we will see on the statistic table, Because society is not safe for men to open up, And if we do open up, what are we going to be met with? shame, humiliation, mocking. And so creating a safe space where men feel safe and seen has been the honor of this work. And so taking this into prison, like over 90% of people who have perpetrated violence, who are incarcerated, were once upon a time a victim themselves. And so the reason why I do this work, because when you can heal the victim or the person who was, abused, when you heal the victim, you heal the man. When you heal that man, you heal the whānau, you heal our community. Mm-hmm. And so it's important because these men come out and you have little Matts, little James who are waiting for their Superman, Supermum to be healed, to be better. And if they don't, the cycle just carries on. They'll leave that relationship, get a new partner, and carry on the cycle.
Your vision is just incredibly clear. It's from here. I can see that it just makes sense. Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's why I'm doing it. But I imagine there's been roadblocks, there's been obstacles, there's been challenges, maybe days of, this is so damn hard. Why are we doing this? What keeps you doing it?
It is hard. I mean, this is not a very popular, topic to talk about. It's not a popular business plan, Step 1, get a barbershop. Step 2, start crying with your clients. But what makes it worth it is our children. Yeah. My children, the children who write to me. I mean, I spoke at New Plymouth Boys High School last week, and I have received over 100 messages. I spoke to 400 students, year 9, 10, and 11, and over 100 students have all written to me on social media, connecting with the message. Wow. Resilience, building resilience, what it's like for young boys growing up in society today. And so for me, it's just being authentic with who I am. I don't come with a massive degree on how to connect with people and heal. I'm just a barber. I'm just a dad who wanted to help my community, and I'm owning my story in its entirety. The abuse, the trauma, the pain, but also the healing and changing the narrative has been my greatest superpower, I suppose, is owning my story.
100%. And imagine if we could all own our stories. We talked yesterday about coming into the room, and we have this mask that we put on when we engage with others in the world. And often that's because we haven't owned our story. So in the book, you talk about owning the story. So how could someone sitting in the audience right now begin to own their story? What does that look like?
I know how it feels.
How does it feel?
How it feels is scary.
Yeah.
Scary as fuck. And I say scary because in order to own your story, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable. I'm vulnerable with every guy who sits in my chair. And when I say vulnerable, I'm vulnerable with my story first. When you're vulnerable with your story, you give permission for other people to be vulnerable in their story. And so being vulnerable is scary as hell for men, In gang culture, the neighborhood that I grew up, if you're vulnerable, that's used against you. And in a lot of society, in a lot of sports clubs, if you're vulnerable, that's used against you, especially in male culture. And so owning that and telling my story, getting pushback from when I was 15 from my own boys, don't talk about that shit, that happens to all of us, but, you're bringing shame. All those things, it's hard, and how it feels is, shame feels like sweaty hands, your stomach is rumbling like a washing machine, all those feels, but the only way through vulnerability the only way to get past vulnerability is to go through it. And I feel it's been my greatest power, being vulnerable, owning my story. I mean, no one wants to hear about you being abused from the age of 3. But I stand in my power, I stand in the mana that was my story, but that's not who I am today. And so it's hard. I remember the first time I ever talked about, the hardest chapter in that book to write was chapter 4. If you do get to that chapter, it's called She Is Not Your Shame. Shame was something that crippled me for so many years. And when I talk about shame, I talk about it in the book where I was, one of my parents' tactics of disciplining me as a kid was stripping me naked and laughing at my body parts. And so that shame, haunted my entire childhood. It was the reason why I never, I didn't lose my virginity until I met my wife, because that shame just crippled me. To have people laugh at your, masculinity from a young age was haunting, to say the least. But owning that story has been so freeing. The first time I ever shared that in public, I just stood there and cried. I cried in front of my barbers telling that story. I can tell that story now because I've gone through that vulnerability, and I own that story. But in saying that, that chapter has been the most powerful chapter It's a chapter that most men around the world have written to me and said, I've struggled with body shame. And these are men who I think, bro, you got like 8 abs. Like, what are you on about? Like, I've struggled with body shame. And so to hear a guy talk about body shame is been freedom.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. And for the last day and a bit, we've been talking about high-performance leadership. And I look at you as the ultimate high-performing leader. And that's because high-performing leaders lead self. They don't start by telling other people what to do. They start by leading self and working on self. Now, you've made some big moves in the last year. So the barber shop is now sold, and you've turned your focus. So can we learn a little bit more about what your vision is now, why you made that huge decision, and now you're focused on this?
Cool. Our barber shop on Riccarton Road, my father's barbers, we closed down a few months ago. Our lease came to an end, so we were asked to renew the lease for another 4 years. I said, I'm hardly here now. I've been traveling a lot, talking about these awesome subjects. But yeah, the book's taken off. It's just opened up so many doors. We are about to drop a mental health app for men that I've been working on for 3 years. This mental health app is called Inner Boy. This was actually birthed around COVID, during lockdown. I jumped on national television and did an interview with Dr. Ange Jury, who is the CEO of Women's Refuge. And something came over me, and I said on national television, if there's any brothers out there, any men out there who are struggling with violence or struggling with their mental health, please reach out to me. I promise I'll respond. Next minute, like thousands and thousands of people were messaging me. I was up till 3 o'clock in the morning every night for that 6 weeks, writing back to men. And I didn't want to copy and paste. I wanted it to all be, genuine and unique messaging. But what really broke my heart was receiving this message from a 12-year-old boy who said, Matt, I watched your interview last night on television. You said that you help men who struggle with anger. Can you please help me help my father from stop abusing my little brother? When I read that message, I thought, this is not our children's responsibility to regulate grown as men and their emotions. This is not their responsibility. And so I jumped online, me and my wife jumped online. I tried to find help, what was online, and there was nothing. And the stuff that was online was outdated, inaccessible, cost money, and I thought we need to create our own thing. And so we created this mental health app called Inner Boy. It's all our work that we've done over the last 15 years, put onto an online tech platform to help and teach men how to regulate their emotions, how to navigate anger, because anger is a good emotion if it's used properly, but anger used wrong can be destructive. I teach people to use anger to change the world. I'm angry at my childhood, but I'm not going to use that on my wife and my children. I'm going to use that in shifting culture and normalizing these conversations. So that mental health app drops on Monday.
This coming Monday?
This
awesome.
coming Monday.
And it's called Inner Boy?
Inner Boy. So
okay,
it's not on the App Store yet, so you have to actually put it in on the address, the web search. It's innerboy.nz. So it's really connecting with the inner child. Again, like I said, when you can heal the inner boy, the inner child, you heal the adult. And then we've also opened up an art gallery here in town. This was the evolution of our kaupapa. She is not your rehab is very triggering for a lot of brothers. I get messages all the time. I've had men sit in my barbershop waiting to have a conversation with me, and I'm booked out for the whole day, but they've sat there for 2 hours till my lunch break just to tell me that they don't like the title. Like, what about he is not your rehab? And so for me, I always say yes, violence happens both ways. We know that. Women also abuse men. I have men in my chair who are crying because they can't see their children, or they don't have access to their kids, or their partners have abused them. Some women do hit men, but we cannot deny the fact that we are losing women and children at the hands of unregulated adults, men, nearly once a week. In Australia, we lose one woman once a week at the hands of a man. And so, but then my thing is, we're also losing men at the hands of men. We're taking our own lives because we don't know how to regulate these hard emotions and feelings. And so the evolution of our kaupapa was, we posed the question to our socials, if she is not your rehab, then who is she? And so we wanted that question, we wanted men to answer and engage. And so we put that question on socials last year, White Ribbon Day, which was November, and we had over 3,000 men from around the world write in a word of who she was to them. So it was targeted at their partner, their mum, their daughter, and it was beautiful. My job was to go through and read every single submission and then choose the top 100. And so we chose the top 100. I reached out to a famous, well-known Māori artist called Mr. G from Tauranga. And this guy is so busy, but he loved the kaupapa, and he wanted to fit us in, so he flew down, and we painted 100 canvases, and we painted 100 words. And so the most submitted word that men submitted over 300 times was the word home. She is home. And so we crossed out not your rehab, and we put on the affirming word of who she was to them. And so Mr. G flew down, a guy who is headhunted after Marvel. He's done stuff for Marvel, for Star Wars, for celebrities all around the world. And this guy, he gave his time for free for this kaupapa. And so that's our art gallery in town. So,
you got to go check the art gallery out. It's phenomenal. It's a beautiful place. People get married at the gallery as well. And the artwork is next level. Like, it's incredible. So I've got my name on 3 of those. They go on sale in July.
Yes.
I want them up in my office. They look amazing.
So one thing we're doing is, I've never asked, I'm not someone to ask for money. And so we're doing a crowdfund come July. So we've completed stage 1 of our app. Thank you to, funding from MSD. But stage 2, we have to find the funds ourselves. And so we had this idea to sell art prints. So there's 100 paintings. We're going to sell a limited edition of each art print at $365. So $1 a day. 365. Mr. G, his own art prints, a minimum, he would usually sell for 600, no more than 600. So for us, all this money will go back into phase 2 of our app and creating, this tech to help support our men and making this accessible and free.
Amazing. And if there's someone here that goes, actually, I know someone who knows someone, or I've got a thing that can help, or let me introduce you, then please do that. If someone's listening to this online or listening to this on the podcast, same thing, reach out, we'll connect you in with Matt. But Matt, the work that you're doing is needed. We chatted earlier about New Zealand being world champions in child mortality, in teen suicide, in domestic violence. And it's the wrong kind of records that we want to be setting.
Yeah.
And the work that you're doing is directly impacting that. So if we were to sit here in 5 years' time, which I hope we get to do, and you were to look back and be most proud, what would be the thing that you would think, and that's the one thing that I want to achieve?
Normalizing this conversation. I think we have, even when getting into barbering, I would have traditional old school barbers message me 15 years ago and say, bro, shut up. Stop talking about this mental health stuff. You're a good barber, stick to cutting here. COVID hit. All those same barbers who were messaging me negative stuff are now reaching out bro, my mental health is not good. How do we have these conversations in the barbershop? So normalizing that conversation, I think I'll be proud of, talking about their feelings and not just talking about their feelings. There's a massive narrative out there right now telling men, reach out, speak up. But my thing is, what after we speak up? If we speak up, are you safe to speak up to? Are you safe for us to open up to? And so my challenge always is, are you safe enough? Because it's fine telling people to speak up and reach out, but if they reach out, what are they going to be met with? So my thing is, are you safe enough for these men to reach out? Be safe, be that safe person. And how you be that safe person is you have to model that yourself. Sorry. But yeah, I'll be proud of that in 5 years' time, that we have really shifted that, made a dent in our statistic, numbers come down with family violence, and suicide.
100%. And we can all help with that. That's the thing. Each and every one of us has the capability within ourselves and our families and our communities and the places we work to actually help Matt with that vision by normalizing the conversation, by creating safe space, by working on self.
It's a we problem, whether you like it or not, or if you sit behind your white picket fence, this is a we problem. This has cost, domestic violence alone has cost this country, us, the taxpayer, $80 billion the last 10 years. And that's policing, that's incarceration, that's health. It's just domestic violence alone has cost us $80 billion. So when we think, when we want our roads to be, fixed and all that stuff, our money is going to this stuff, to domestic violence. And so it's a we problem.
100%. And one last question just before we open up to Q&A. If we were to fast forward very, very many years into the future, and you know that it's your last day here on Earth, and someone very young, maybe a great-grandchild or a grandchild, says to you, Matt, how can I lead my life on purpose? What might you say to them?
Well, I've never been asked that question. A young person, I would say, own your story and love your mum. Yeah.
Beautiful. Matt, thank you so much. Please put your hands together. Thanks, Matt. Amazing, man. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the content today, please smash that subscribe button below. And if you want to become part of my community, I've got an amazing free Facebook group. Please come and join us. The link is in the description below. And also, if you've got any questions about today's session, I'd love to know. Just comment below and I'll be sure to get back to you guys. Have the most amazing day.